Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Spece. Welcome to Second Wind Women. I'm here today with Carla Waywright. She is a holistic wellness coach and sexual awakening facilitator and midlife alchemist. All cool titles. She supports women who are over 40, helping them to reclaim their vitality, balance their hormones, and reconnect with their pleasure and power through a blend of metabolic health, nervous system healing, and sensual embodiment. Gonna have to ask you about that. With a background in biology, homeopathy, and over 2 decades of experience in the healing arts, bridges the science of the body with the sacredness of lived experience. Her work helps women shift from surviving to thriving by listening to their body signals, reawakening their desire, and embracing midlife as a powerful rite of passage. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here, Karen.
I'm so happy to have you here today. So you started out as a wildlife biologist, is that right?
Yes, so that's my original background. I always had a love of nature and of animals and just being in the wilderness, and so that led me to study zoology and conservation biology as a young person, and I did that for many years.
Wow, wow. So were you kind of an in the field person or a researcher or both?
Both. So, I did a lot of field work, which was amazing. I did a lot of office work, which was less amazing, but,
Yes, yeah.
necessary. I work primarily with endangered species, which, I enjoyed many aspects of that. And then actually once I had children, then of course the field work had to diminish a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was your I mean, we'll get more into like the sensual pleasure and all that later. But what was your focus? I mean, I know that you don't just like do you have like a certain type of animal that you were working with, or were you working more on like behaviors across a broad spectrum of animals? What kind of were you studying?
So, I would part of what I was working with was broad spectrum in terms of meeting biodiversity needs and habitat needs for certain key species. And then I did a lot of work also around caribou, white sturgeon, which are both endangered species, and then sort of a smattering of other things in between. But yeah, kind of a big mix.
So, how does that inform your work with people now?
Oh, that's such a good question. I've never been asked that before.
Yeah.
Well, so what I would say is that it really informs the work that I do. I think, as I said, with this a really early connection and love for nature and the feeling that I got in nature and being able to immerse myself in wild spaces. One of the things I've always been really fascinated with was kind of like the microcosm. As a child, I would create these little tiny universes within, whatever natural environment was in. I was always really fascinated by things that were small and then, observing that. And so I feel like the thread of really connecting to nature informs my work now because when we're in nature, we have this really powerful experience in our bodies of feeling deeply connected to life. And, whether you're doing that in the science realm of biology or whatever that is, or you're in the more esoteric field, we as human beings have a deep connection to nature and of course our bodies. And one of the gifts that nature gives us is this capacity to slow down, feel, and be present. And it's something that is we've lost that capacity in many ways in our modern lives. We don't give ourselves enough time to really reset in those environments. And so, yeah, I do. I feel like there are many threads that, I get the same feeling that originally connected me to that work as a biologist in the work that I do now, because it's the feeling of really being connected and inside this incredible body that I have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I always try to look for the continuity thread because to me, that's what's so fascinating about hearing people's origin stories and how things evolved and what kind of got them twisted up along the way, because there's always some kind of continuity through it. And it's really interesting. I had a friend who used to say, like, everybody has like a word that's their word, like integrity or truth or beauty or like something that's like their thread. So that's cool. That's cool. So you kept working in biology after you had your children.
Yep,
right?
I kind of was doing sort of double duty, let's say. So in my
Mhm.
20s, as I was working as a biologist, I was really also on a journey to heal some trauma that I'd experienced, particularly sexual trauma in my 20s, but also just life and all of those different pieces. And I started to become exposed to the more esoteric and spiritual practices of yoga and tantra and energy work, homeopathy, which originally in my very sort of very mainstream Western scientific mind was very difficult to actually comprehend or make sense of or rationalize or actually this is all kind of BS. But
Yeah,
it
when you
was.
see the ratios, you're like, "Why does this work?"
Yeah, exactly, but my lived felt experience was telling me otherwise, and I had enough of those experiences, and some of them were quite profound, that I was like, "Okay, wait a second, there's something here," and I was deeply curious about that. So I started this kind of dual path of continuing to do the work in as a biologist, but at the same time becoming more curious and delving into the healing arts. And then I really reached a choice point in my 30s where the biology work was not fulfilling. I didn't feel like it was fulfilling my purpose in this lifetime, and I really sensed that the work that I was doing within, we'll call it the healing arts, was having a much more significant impact in the world. And for me, service is really like that's one of my core values. And so being in service and really feeling that the work I was doing was benefiting humanity and the world, I decided to make that shift and transition over completely into that field.
So how did you begin that shift? Were you, like, doing homeopathy on the side? Because I know that's, like, a big program, right? I mean, how did you, like, ease in?
Yeah, well, my husband will definitely say I'm an overachiever. It's as soon as we found out I was pregnant with twins, he's like, "Of course you are."
That's funny.
So yes, I studied homeopathy. I ran a yoga studio at the same time as working as a biologist. I was teaching classes. I was doing all the things. That's part of, I think, like having like a curious mind and feeling, a deep resonance with so many things and being interested in so many things. So yes, I kind of did a lot of different things concurrently, but it was wonderful, and
Mhm.
it continues to be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned that you did some healing of sexual trauma. Is that the basis of your, what did you call it? Sexual awakening facilitator work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
those experiences completely shut me down in terms of not just my sexuality, but also just being able to feel anything in my body. I was definitely numb. My nervous system was completely dysregulated, which was kind of was sort of the straw tip that broke the camel's back because as a child I also had a very dysregulated nervous system, but this just kind of was like the things that were just too much. And I just didn't want to accept that this was, at such a young age, going to be the reality for the rest of my life. So it really did lead me into this exploration. So first, in yoga, and even I just had somebody, I think it was a massage therapist, who just actually slowed down. We spent the whole session. She just taught me how to actually breathe into my diaphragm, which I don't think I had ever done in my life, maybe as a very, like as an infant or something. And there were just these changes, and I was just like, what is happening? And so that really did take me into this exploration of healing my sexual trauma and understanding the power, especially for women, of our sexual life force energy and how potent it is. And it's not only around sex, of course, that's a huge part of it, but it is really this is our creative energy. So I love the word creatrix. It's she who creates. It's a very old English word.
That's very
That
cool.
when energy lives in our pelvis and our womb space, and it is so potent and powerful. And when I learned over time, and it wasn't an overnight thing, I had to really be dedicated and
Mhm.
had a lot of support to awaken that. That is what really created that dramatic shift, and really in terms of reclaiming my body once again.
Mhm. Mhm. And then how did you start working with people? Did that naturally happen because you were in kind of a yoga space? Or how did you get training on that? Or did you just, like, go from your experience and all the knowledge that you gained during your own personal journey, kind of wrap it into your own offering?
Well, somewhat both, but no, I definitely did training. So I did sexual awakening training with a wonderful South African teacher named Shakti Malan, who unfortunately has passed away. She was a really pioneer in this reclamation of our sexual life force energy. And of course, like I'd already trained as a senior yoga teacher and I had a studio. And then I went on later to do Layla Martin's sex, love, and relationship training. So, I mean, yes, I've done a bunch of trainings because those, as powerful and potent as my life experience was and is and continues to be, the training and learning how to hold a container and practices and really feeling that that solid foundation was there for me was really important. And then of course having the yoga studio and then just teaching and just being authentically me and sharing my experiences, of course, then that was the kind of magnetism that drew women into my sphere and allowed me to give them the support that they needed.
So I'm guessing you work with women who are childbearing age through menopause, or
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
kind of your main spot. Yeah.
Well, I would say so as I've aged and I'm 54 now, the demographic that I serve has also shifted and changed. So, I really embarked upon this journey in my 30s and I still work with younger women, but my focus now is really women 40 plus who are navigating the experience of perimenopause and then into that transition of menopause and beyond. That is really today what my focus is. And um, just to share, when I talk about myself being a midlife alchemist, part of this revelation for me was, you heard of my story. I started off as a scientist, and then in as wildlife biologist, and then I moved into the more esoteric and the healing arts. And then in my 40s, I actually brought back the science once again in as I realized I needed to support my body in different ways, that the energetic work that I was doing, all of the healing arts was very powerful, but there was something missing. And so pulling back in, I'm so grateful for my scientific education, my capacity to dilute that information and really not dilute, but take it in and, integrate it. And so now I feel like I've actually in some ways come full circle that as this midlife alchemist, I'm bringing in the sacred metabolism of energy from, energy from from in terms of what we're doing in this physical world, but also in that which can't be seen. And so, yeah, today, in my service to women, I'm really focusing on, all of these pieces that I've gleaned in my lifetime and really moving that forward with women in what I think is this transition into the most powerful time of their lives.
That's 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 really incredible, and I feel like a part of that integration, not only of our experiences over our life through our paths, but integration of the different tools available to us. I feel like there's part of a maturing that happens where you're like, you know, traditional medicine didn't work for me, so all of it is terrible. Or, I only, I grew up with like, energetic hippie medicine, and I think that doesn't work at all. But as you grow up and you're pulling in these different parts, grow up. Like when you get your 50s, you're really grown up, right? Where you're pulling in all these different parts, like your scientific background, right? But as I talk to more and more people and find out the deeper stories of where they come from, I think it's actually pretty common that you're getting to a point where you're pulling together these seemingly disparate things into something that's a lot more potent.
Absolutely. I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think I see that in my own kids who are young adults now. This sort of necessary pulling away and individuation and kind of claiming one thing. And I think that's part of, our growth as humans. And then we soften a little bit and we become more discerning a little bit. And we're able to perhaps not be so rigid and everything has to be in a very clear box. We can actually, pull those boxes together and build something really cool. So yeah, I love to hear that, hearing that you're noticing this, with other people that you're connecting to, because it's so true. I don't regret any part of my path because of course it informs who I am today.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that way as well. So one of the things I really wanted to talk with you about was about the impact of perimenopause on basically like a woman's evolutionary life path, right? So, because most of the people I'm talking to in this podcast are I say they've reached their fuck it point, right? You worked really hard at something and you get to the point you're like, fuck it, this is not the life I wanted. This is not, and then they reframe into a creative endeavor. They go into, corporate when they've never been in corporate. Like they get to their point and then how much how informed is that by perimenopause and menopause? And what impact does perimenopause and menopause have upon their ability to make those changes? Or does it spark those changes in the first place or add to them? That's a lot of questions.
Yes, it's a great question. So I think there's a few different threads here. So the first one is that there is actually a biological drive and a hormonal shift that's happening within us that allows us, as we move into, through perimenopause into menopause and beyond, to get a lot clearer about our desires, our purpose, and what we want. And so from an evolutionary perspective, women are people pleasers, and that kept us safe. So we needed to ensure that, we would be accepted by our tribe, that we would be protected, that, our safety was always of primary concern. And then, of course, of our children as well. But as we begin to age and we shift in those kind of neurochemicals that we have as a result of, estrogen, progesterone declining and some of those other neurochemicals, what happens, and when you say it's like the fuck it age, it's literally that. So that inclination, which is a biological drive to be pleasing, to put other people's needs before our own, it diminishes. And it's not just like an individual thing. It is actually what's happening in your biology. And so it allows women to, there's a transition period for sure. It allows women to really step into this place of, often for the very first time in their lives, considering what would make them happy. What do I want to do in the world? What is the impact that I want to see? And it's very, very powerful. That said, I think this is available to every woman, but there's a lot of forces that push against that to try to keep us small, to try to keep us silent, or just not fully standing into our power, cultural, societal. And then, of course, the assault that's on our bodies in terms of food and chemicals and all of those sorts of things. So where there is really this biological shift that's supposed to happen naturally, we have to actually really be intentional to claim it. And so I believe that menopause and beyond is the most powerful time for a woman. Is just like we really step into that wise woman energy, and we have so much to contribute, but we have to be intentional about it, because I wouldn't say that society is really supporting us to actually get there and stand fully in that power.
Right, right. And so probably that lends to why a lot of women go into entrepreneurship as they get a little bit older, right? Can you speak to a little bit about kind of like not in terms of biology, but more in terms of like a spiritual shift or an energetic shift? What happens during that part of your life?
Yeah. So there's the Taoists have a beautiful term for a woman once she's entered menopause, and it said that she goes into her second spring. And this actually,
Nice.
yeah, isn't
Yeah.
that beautiful? And so this comes from the Book of the Yellow Emperor. It was written about 3000 BC. It's very, very old text. And it describes how when a woman finishes her menstruation, that that creative life force energy that she would shed every month through her period or use to create a new life, that energy becomes available to her, and it gets channeled up through the heart and allows her to create things from this sexual life force energy. And it's very, very powerful. So this is also something that happens for women that we may not be aware of. But from an energetic perspective, that creative life force energy, it creates life, it creates ideas, it creates so many things. But menstruation, it's a very important process of cleansing, and at a certain point in our lives, very much needed. But because we don't do that once we've reached menopause and beyond, that energy, instead of it just being latent and doing nothing, is available to create, to manifest, to step into that highest vision of ourselves and the capacity as like the wise woman. So yes, we have the biology, but we also have the energy. And this is also, I think, for many women, like an untapped resource, because I think when women actually, first of all, reframe like second spring, how beautiful. So instead of you being like withered, dried up, useless, not relevant in society, this is actually like my second becoming. And I'm really stepping into that. And oh, wow, I actually have this energy within myself that I can use to fuel my creative nature, my ideas, my projects, the things I want to really have come alive in the world. So I think that when, we understand that that's available to us, just the knowing of that, it's almost like it flips a switch. And it's not to say that it'll go from 0 to 100 necessarily, although it might. I think that when we understand the actual potential that is here, it's very, very empowering.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And and there is something too about women in midlife. There's more of a tribe mentality, I think, even though, there's all this, in certain circles, there's all this talk about like it takes a village to raise a child, which is all very lovely. I did my ex-husband is from a very, very rural part of the world, and it actually did take a tribe there, and it was not as fun as a lot of these people think with the tribe, right? I understand there are a lot of obligations in a tribe that you don't have. We could just go home and like turn on Netflix and do nothing, right? But it seems to me that there's this huge need for and drive for a tribe and support for women who are in this age or moving forward from this age. Yeah, I mean, what would you say about that in terms of not only in terms of kind of biology, but in terms of, I mean, you think that's because of the energetic and physiological shifts, or do you think that's as a, partially or very supported by the the idea from our culture in general that we're dried out and what, best years are behind us and get somebody fresher in there, you know? What do you think is you understand? I'm I'm formulating the question horribly, but I'm sure you get the vibe.
Yeah, I think so. So I think, as women, yeah, so there's a biological piece to this for sure, that we thrive in community. Women's circles in cultures all over the world for millennia have been a very powerful place to come together and commune and get support. And I think that, our society is pretty individualistic and we're raised in that way. Like, I can do everything on my own. And I hear you about, it takes a village to raise a child. I didn't have a village helping me to raise my kids. I think that we like those ideas, but they don't
Yeah.
necessarily really play out. And I think that there's something, again, there's a shift that happens, that there's a desire to come into community as women at this phase in our lives that's just solely for us. Like, it's not for the kids, it's not for the partner, it's not for all the things. It's just to be like seen and connected in a way that really like accentuates those heart bonds of affection. And I think there's just a deep craving for that. I've been so like I've led women's circles for so many years and been in different kinds of women's groups. And I hear so often from women who have their very first experience in this, it is just like it's speaking to something deep in their blood and their bones that they didn't even know they needed. And a lot of women are like, I never even knew anyone else felt this way. I think there's something, a remembrance. I love that word remembrance that comes like deep within us that speaks to our lineage, generations and generations of needing that connection with women for support. And I think that when we start to move into that threshold of perimenopause and beyond, we really start to listen to that. And we want that for ourselves, not for anyone else, but just for ourselves.
Let's go back a little bit to the kind of pleasure and sexual focused work that you do, because I feel like a lot of people also when they get to their fuck it point, it's because of they've been in an unsatisfying relationship or they've had trauma that they've been trying to repress for a long time, and and they reach a breaking point, partially due to, like you're talking about, the hormones you know and basically things kind of falling away. But how do you work with women? Because I know that as you get older too, like you don't have the same level of libido, right? That you used to have. And I know that That's often when people are in unsatisfying relationships, libido is an issue. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So again, there's so many threads and layers to this. So yes, our sexual desire absolutely can change as we age, but I don't want to say like it's a universal thing because for many women, menopause becomes a liberation. Not having a period, even if they were using birth control, there's something about not being fertile anymore that's very liberating and sexually freeing. A lot of women 50, 60, 70 beyond report having the best sex of their lives. And there's a whole bunch of factors that relate, that contribute to that. But for
Like
many
what?
women,
Like what? Like what? You
factors
said
that
there's a
can
bunch of factors that contribute to that. Like what?
right. So the factors that would contribute to that, well, I think I'm going to get to that in terms of
Okay. All right.
yeah. So, but not feeling that is also very, very real. And so I want to absolutely name that. And so one of the big pieces for women around libido and sexual desire in their 40s and beyond is stress. We all know stress is bad for us and we hear about stress every day, but it is a real thing. And the amount of stress that women are experiencing in this modern age is really unparalleled. And we don't have the biology or the evolutionary design and capacity to handle it. And so as our hormones change, the hormones of estrogen and progesterone, which provided a buffer to stress, begin to decrease. And it becomes this kind of like cyclical thing where, we're experiencing stress, we don't have the buffers, we experience more stress. And because of that, we experience more stress, et cetera, et cetera. And stress is such a huge libido killer. And so the women, if we go back to, the women who are thriving, in large part, it's because they have tools and also a lifestyle that supports them to have lower stress levels. If their stress levels are lower, their insulin is more regulated, which means there's fewer big ups and downs, which lead to kind of a more even sense of feeling good in your body, and also helps to support whatever sex hormones you're still producing. So when you go into menopause, you're no longer producing sex hormones through your ovaries, you're producing them through your adrenal glands. And if your adrenal glands are constantly under stress, then our sex
Um,
hormones are going to totally tank. Right. So there's
yeah.
all of these factors. So part of the reason I came back to this science lens in the work that I do is that metabolic health is so important. It is probably one of the most important things that women need to attend to I think we need to start doing this like at a very young age, but
Mhm.
you really need to start attending to this because if you envision your life, and I think future casting is a very powerful practice, if you envision your life as a woman who is aging and is still vibrant, connected to her sexual life force energy, is creating amazing things in the world, is sexually vibrant, enjoying sex, having orgasms, whatever that looks like, your metabolic health is a big part of it. Yes, we also need to do other practices. I think that equally, like they both hold a lot of importance and function within a vibrant, healthy being and body. But I think that this is a big piece that's often missing, that if our libido is tanking, well, what's happening at a physiological level that's contributing to that? And so those are inputs that I can actually have some control over. Stress is actually really difficult to manage as somebody who I will be the first to admit, like I had a very difficult 5 years. I lost both my parents, within just over a year. I was caregiving, all of these things. My stress level has been very, very high. And at the same time, I'm doing everything I can to support my lifestyle, to support my body so that the effects are as minimized as possible. And so I think I might have gone off on a little bit of a tangent, but, you know, if we're talking about libido, we can't separate that from our metabolic health and what we're doing in our lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how it's all tied in together, isn't it?
All of it. We're a complex system, right? This is a
Yeah.
complex system. Nature is a complex system. There are many different pieces that contribute to it. And I would say that we understand just like the tiniest, tiniest little bit. Sometimes we think that, you know, science is at some kind of pinnacle or our knowing as human beings are at some pinnacle of understanding. That's like completely not true. We know a little bit and that changes and shifts and we just continue to add and expand to that as we learn.
Yeah. And when you look at how we perceive things is so stark and so absolute when things are so complex, there's no way. Whereas no way you could drill down as far as it possibly goes, regardless of some, dark matter and quantum fields and such. That's some really freaky stuff. But even, you know, how the, tissues in your brain or whatever, right? I don't think we fully understand even the very basics.
I
Yeah.
agree.
So what is a myth about midlife or menopause that you've found that people hold on to and that you kind of steer them away from or steer them towards?
So I think that the biggest myth is that midlife is the start of the decline.
Mm.
And you mentioned this earlier, like that, you're kind of your best years are over. Oh, I hate
Mhm.
that phrase. I cannot even tell you.
Yeah.
And we live in a society that is youth obsessed. There are, multi-billion dollar industries that are invested in making women feel bad about their appearance and
Yeah.
aging and like anti-aging. Like, why are we anti-aging? Like, this is ridiculous. You should be pro-aging, but pro-aging in the healthiest, most vibrant body possible.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we have all of this conditioning, not only conditioning, but kind of like a continual assault on our, brain and our thought patterns about how bad aging is. And so we take a look in a mirror and it happens usually sometime in our 40s and we're like, who's that? I mean, this happened to me too. I'm not immune to this, right? I just try to
Mhm.
be really, really aware of it. So the biggest myth I really would love for women to just really own is that, midlife it is a gateway to profound transformation. And that I really, as I said earlier, I do believe that when you step into your wise woman, into your postmenopausal life, that you have knowledge and insight and creative capacity and fewer fucks given, all of those things that make you a force of nature. And you have to choose it. You absolutely have to choose it. And it doesn't mean that you won't necessarily be upset by the wrinkles and the changes in your body and all those things because you're human. You're not going to be immune to the programming that, is out there. But you'll have enough self-assuredness and enough really sense of power within your own being that, they're kind of like little things that just, oh yeah, that's there. Okay, I let that go. So I really want women to understand that this is something to be excited about. Yeah, the transition can be really challenging. Yes, there's a bunch of symptoms. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and that I'm not minimizing that because it can be really, really big. But what lies on the other side of that is just something really incredible. And so let's be pro aging. Let's be excited about what, the butterfly that we're turning into, all of these things. There's just so much magic and mystery that's awaiting us. And imagine if girls were like, wow, you know what? One day I'm going to be a wise woman. Can't wait. Pretty cool.
I always used to say, like, why wasn't I named Marie Jr. after my mother? Nobody names their daughters after their moms.
That's so true.
I thought that was really interesting. It's a similar kind of thing where we're not idealizing the female experience. And I love this idea that I could, when I grow up, I'm going to be old and I'm going to be powerful.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. So do you think that's why so many women are in the healing arts? And I mean, for me, people who are in the creative arts, it's very much like a spiritual calling. Do you think that's why so many women are in these starting businesses in these type of industries when they're in midlife?
Yeah. I think that it comes to this remembrance that is really deep within us, that there's some inner knowing, and whether that can be articulated or it just sort of resides in the subconscious somewhere, that propels women to go into the healing arts. I mean, I think, women far outweigh in terms of numbers in the healing arts than men. And I think it's because of this profound remembrance of who we are and who we can be, that drives women into this field. And I think also, my teacher that I mentioned earlier, Shakti Malan, she often would talk about how women have been really relegated to the role of junior male in our lives. I mean, we live in a very hyper masculinized world, and for women to succeed, we've often had to take on not male like personality traits to be successful. That's just the way it is. And for many women, they kind of wake up one day after maybe doing 20 years of that. And it's just like, keep I can't keep doing that. It's so against like my who I know myself to be or just how I feel in my body or what I want, then I'm going to seek something different. And so they go on this different path with something that feels at some level truly resonant.
Yeah, at one point there was, for 5 minutes I was into Twitter and there was this parody account and they would be like, "There's a male fireman coming. There's a male policeman." Because a male doctor. "Oh, look, isn't that cute? It's a male doctor." Just like as a turnaround because we tend to like you're talking about, right? See these stereotypes in a very masculine centered way. Yeah, that's funny. So one of the things you talk about in your work is sacred metabolism. That's a really unique phrase. Can you kind of characterize what you mean by that?
So I kind of gave a little sprinkling of that earlier. So sacred metabolism is, our bodies function on energy. So metabolism is how we take in energy and use that energy. So of course we have the metabolism that takes in food and all the things that happen as a result of that, allowing us to, be alive in this physical form. But we also have an energy metabolism. And our energy metabolism, as we've been talking about, is really, really important. And I think a lot of women really are drawn to experiencing more of what the energy metabolism allows them to feel. So for me, the sacred metabolism is acknowledging that we have the physical, but we also have the energetic. And that for women, I mean, for men too, it's not to say that men just
Of
function
course
on the
not.
physical, not at all. But I think because we have been so separated from our energy bodies and then also not attending to our physical bodies as optimally as we could, there's a real disconnect. So the sacred metabolism is acknowledging we have these two types of metabolisms and we need to tend to both in order to really thrive in our bodies. So many women are just kind of surviving. We want to thrive, not just survive, which I know we've heard that term, that kind of saying often, but it's really true. And for me, tending to both types of our metabolism is the key to allowing that to happen.
So, can you talk a little bit about the role of pleasure in thriving in business and health and life?
Yes. So pleasure is one of my favorite topics. And I think that, and I don't think, I know that pleasure is one of the most important experiences that we can have to really thrive in our bodies. And we're designed to experience pleasure. We have five senses that can bring pleasure in so many different ways. And I always like to clarify that I think for many women in particular, we associate like pleasure has to be sexual. Pleasure can absolutely be sexual. Sexual pleasure is amazing, but pleasure has so many different forms,
Mhm.
right? So just, looking at something beautiful, like being in a forest and looking and immersing yourself in that, that's pleasurable, right? So the first thing around pleasure is to expand what our definition of it is.
Mhm.
And what pleasure does is it releases hormones that become the antidote to stress and then allow everything else in the body to function in a more balanced, harmonious, and optimal state. So every time we have a pleasurable experience, it will release oxytocin. Oxytocin is such a powerful hormone. It is literally the antidote to cortisol. So if cortisol is high, we have an oxytocin moment, cortisol begins to go down, our blood sugar becomes more regulated, our sex hormones are able to optimize better as well as our thyroid. So we want to ensure that we're having lots of pleasurable experiences each and every day. The half-life of oxytocin is only 3 minutes, right? So we have to, yeah, I know, it's a
Like
bummer.
poppers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we wanna make sure that we're getting as many pleasurable experiences as possible. So in the work that I do, uh, pleasure is always at a forefront. Like, how can we have these microdoses throughout our day and be intentional about it? Because you're actually experiencing pleasure. No, I should correct that. You have the opportunity or the potential to be present with pleasure throughout your day. It's just that we're so tuned out and disconnected that we don't know.
Yeah.
You're looking at things all through your day that could give you pleasure. You're hearing
When you're
things,
living from here up, it's
right? You're
harder.
tasting things,
Yeah.
smelling things, all these things. But if you notice them, the effect biochemically in the body is so different. right? So pleasure really needs to be at the forefront. And pleasure begets more pleasure. The more we notice, the more we're able to receive, the more of these types of experiences we're going to bring in. And then all of the magical things that happen in our body that we desire begin to just fall into place.
That's amazing. Why isn't that on billboards? Seriously, seriously, oxytocin is the antidote to cortisol. That should be on billboards.
Yeah. It should be. I totally agree. It's a like I give these very doable practices around pleasure and oxytocin as, for anybody because they're just so profound. And I think that if everybody understood that, wow, like what a shift we would experience as humanity.
Yeah, you do have something on your website. I actually just signed up for it before we talked. What was the thing that you little freebie that you have?
Right. It's called the Vibrancy Guide. So basically, what this is it's 5 different steps that any woman can take to integrate into her life right away to feel more vibrant. So there's things in there about pleasure, hormones, metabolism, overall vitality. And one of the really important guidelines, or not guidelines, rather, I'm just struggling on the word here for a moment, but principles in my work is that things are doable. We have so much on our plates. We have to be able to take in small practices that build upon one another to create momentum. So I created the Vibrancy Guide with the idea in mind that for the busy woman who's got a lot on her plate but wants to start feeling better in her body, what are, 5 simple steps you can take right away to really start to feel good in this incredible body that you have?
That's amazing. And as someone who's struggled with hot flashes for nearly 10 years, I could feel that cortisol like like I was getting an injection. So I can't say how profound that is, to be able to mitigate that. And this is, I think that's part of too our fuck it point, right? Where you get to a point and you're like, I want to enjoy this life. Like like, I've struggled. I've tried that struggling thing. It's tough. How much time do I have left to struggle? That's nothing to look forward to. I wanna do stuff that I look forward to every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if this life is pretty incredible, and I think that the struggle's part of it, but I don't think there has to be so much suffering. I think that, we do have a choice point around that. And so, yeah, let's choose something different.
And struggling isn't noble. Suffering isn't I mean, struggling maybe, suffering, no.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was so awesome to talk with you, Carla. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Oh, it's been a delight talking with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a great day. Thanks for watching today. I'm glad you watched the whole thing. If you could do us a favor, it would help so much if you hit subscribe. It helps give us just a little boost to keep this podcast going. Thank you.